All right, so are you ready to get a little freaked out today? We're going deep on Pigman stories.
Pigman.
Yeah, Pigman, and we've got all kinds of stuff to go through, blog posts and articles. There's even
Yeah.
a whole scholarly PDF on this. And these guys, these pig-faced figures, they're not just like some local myth either.
Right.
We're seeing reports from Vermont all the way down to Texas with New York and Georgia and Tennessee all in between.
Yeah, it's fascinating how widespread they are, these pigmen legends. And yet they share that common thread, like a fear of the grotesque.
The grotesque, yeah.
It really seems like the human-pig hybrid, it just taps into something primal.
Yeah.
A fear that just goes beyond any region.
Okay, well, so let's start with what might be the most well-known one of these creepy tales, and that's the Pigman of Northfield, Vermont.
Right?
This one's been giving Vermonters chills since way back in the 1950s.
Yeah.
So picture this, a naked man with a pig snout terrorizing couples who are parked out in the woods.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about a nightmare, right?
Absolutely.
And to make it even creepier, there's this possible connection to a missing teenager, a kid named Sam Harris, who just vanished back in 1951.
It's interesting how this particular pigman, he's often portrayed as this cautionary figure.
Really?
Yeah, almost like, like figures in traditional folklore. He serves as this warning, especially to teenagers, I think.
About?
Well, about engaging in certain activities, this kind of illicit activities. And it's almost like the legend itself. It reinforces those social norms.
Through fear.
Yeah, through fear, exactly.
But it makes you wonder if there's some social engineering going on in these tales.
It wouldn't be the first time folklore was used for that.
But the Pigman isn't just in Vermont, is he?
No, no, no.
I mean, our sources point to Pigman bridges popping up all over the place.
Yeah, they really do.
We've got Bonnie Bray Bridge in Denton, Texas, Pigman Bridge in Hawkinsville, Georgia, the Road Bridge in Angola, New York, and even one in Shelby Forest, Tennessee. So why are these creepy figures so often associated with bridges? And specifically in these, rural areas.
That's where I think that concept of liminality comes in.
Liminality.
Yeah, liminality. So bridges, especially in folklore, often symbolize these in-between spaces, thresholds between what we know and the unknown.
Okay.
And they become these almost mystical zones, where that veil between worlds, it feels thin.
Right.
Making them like perfect settings for supernatural encounters.
Okay, so bridges are like gateways to the weird and spooky.
I like that, yeah.
But let's shift gears a bit to the Angola Pigman.
Okay.
We have this really detailed PDF about him, and it suggests this potential link to a real guy named William Derricks.
Interesting.
Who had some facial deformities, and then there was this horrific train wreck. Back in 1867, they called it the Angola Horror.
Oh, wow.
Could this be where the legend was born?
It's certainly possible. I mean, the PDF really digs into the idea that real-life tragedies, especially those involving disfigurement or social ostracism, they can become the seeds for these chilling legends.
Interesting.
It's almost like the collective memory of the community latches onto these events and then transforms them into something monstrous over time.
Okay, so we've got a potential origin story for the Angola Pigman, but things get a little more complicated as we dig deeper.
How so?
Well, some descriptions paint the Pigman as like this full-on monstrous creature.
Okay.
While others portray him as more human-like. Some stories involve violence and others just mischief.
Right.
It's like there's no single consistent image of this figure.
Well, that's the nature of folklore, isn't it?
Is it?
It's constantly being reshaped and reinterpreted as it's passed down through generations.
Right.
Details get added, others fade away.
Sure.
But that core fear, that unsettling feeling of something lurking in the shadows, that remains constant.
So how do we reconcile these conflicting accounts?
Yeah.
What makes certain details stick while others are just forgotten?
Yeah.
And what does that tell us about how legends like the Pigman take root and spread?
Good questions. It is intriguing, though, isn't it? How even with all these variations, there are these recurring elements in Pigman accounts.
Like what?
Well, like the ones that seem to tap into this very specific fear, the fear of the grotesque, of the unnatural merging of human and animal features.
You're right. It's like our brains just can't process that image.
Yeah.
A pig-faced person.
Right.
It's just inherently wrong. It's so disturbing. And it triggers this deep-seated disgust and fear in us.
Absolutely.
Makes you wonder if there's a reason why pig-like features are so commonly associated with monsters and demons across different cultures?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps it's because pigs, they're often associated with these negative traits like filth and gluttony. And those qualities, whether consciously or unconsciously, they might get projected onto these creatures, just amplifying their repulsive nature.
That makes sense. But some pigman descriptions go beyond just the pig-like features.
Oh, yeah.
Like the Vermont pigman, he's often described as naked and hairy, almost like a wild man archetype. But with that added pig snout.
It is a fascinating blend.
It is.
You have that wild man symbolizing, the untamed aspects of nature.
Right.
And then you layer on the pig, bringing in those ideas of like baseness and animalistic urges.
Yeah.
Together, they create a truly potent and unsettling image.
Okay, well, let's get into some actual encounters described in our sources.
Okay.
There's one from the Shelby Forest pigman story, where this group claims they captured video footage of the creature. Interestingly, they describe him as looking more human, but with these tumor-like growths on his face.
And that account really raises the question, doesn't it? Is it possible that some of these sightings are just elaborate hoaxes? Maybe someone, perhaps even a homeless person, as they suggest in that story, is playing into the pigman legend.
Wow.
For their own purposes.
Yeah.
It reminds us that not every strange encounter needs to have a supernatural explanation.
It's like a real-life urban legend coming to life.
Right.
Someone deliberately blurring the lines between myth and reality.
Yeah.
But then we have accounts where people describe seeing these fleeting shadow figures or hearing these strange, almost pig-like squeals out in the woods.
Yeah.
How do we make sense of those?
Well, our senses can be very easily tricked, especially in situations where fear or anxiety is heightening our perception. A fleeting shadow in the right context can easily morph into a monstrous figure in our minds.
Right.
And an animal's sound distorted by darkness and fear can become something far more sinister.
So you're saying our brains are basically filling in the blanks, creating narratives that fit our expectations.
Exactly.
Especially when we're already primed to believe in something like the pigman.
Right, and once that narrative takes hold, it can be really difficult to shake off, even if we encounter evidence that contradicts it. We tend to cling to the story that feels most compelling, most emotionally resonant.
Yeah.
Regardless of its factual basis.
Which brings us back to the big question, are pigmen real? Or are they just figments of our collective imagination, fueled by fear and the power of storytelling?
It's the question that lies at the heart of this whole deep dive, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's no easy answer. But here's what I find most fascinating. Even if we can't definitively prove the existence of pigmen, these stories still hold immense power.
In what way?
Well, they reveal our deep-seated need to make sense of the world around us. Even if that means embracing the fantastical and the terrifying.
You're right. It's like these legends offer us this glimpse into our collective psyche, showing us what we fear, what we desire, what we believe is possible.
Absolutely.
Speaking of desire, this PDF about the Angola pigman mentions William Derrick's fascination with sideshows and oddities.
Oh, really?
Apparently, he even traveled with a circus for a time, showcasing his unusual appearance.
Now, that's an interesting detail.
It is.
It suggests a level of self-awareness, a
Right.
willingness to embrace his otherness. Makes you wonder if there's a connection between his fascination with the strange and unusual and the birth of the pigman legend.
Maybe he saw himself reflected in those sideshow performers, those who existed outside the norms of society.
It's possible.
It adds a whole new layer to his story.
It does. The pigman story, especially the Angola version, becomes more than just a simple monster tale.
Yeah.
It's a story about identity, about finding your place in a world that doesn't always understand or accept you.
And speaking of being ostracized, the PDF also mentions that William Derricks ended up marrying his cousin.
Oh, wow.
It seems like the entire family lived on the fringes of society.
That sense of isolation, of being different and unwanted, is a powerful undercurrent running through this story.
Yeah.
Could the pigman, at least in this version, be a manifestation of that societal rejection? A way to express the anger and resentment of those who've been cast out?
So the pigman becomes a symbol of the outsider,
The outcast.
the one who doesn't fit in. It makes the story even more unsettling because it forces us to confront our own prejudices and fears of those who are different.
Precisely. It holds up a mirror to society.
Yeah.
Revealing the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface.
As we talk about this, I keep coming back to the symbolism of bridges and tunnels. It's like they represent these thresholds in our lives, those moments where we have to choose a path, often with unknown
I
consequences.
like that analogy.
Yeah.
It's as if the pigman stands at these crossroads, challenging us to face our fears, to confront the unknown, and to ultimately decide who we want to be.
So we have this potentially tragic figure, William Derricks, who may or may not be the Angola pigman.
Right.
But what about all the other pigman sightings across the country?
Yeah.
Are they all just copycats inspired by the Angola story, or is there something more going on?
Now that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Is it possible that there's a core archetype at play here? A primal fear of the pig-faced human that manifests in different forms across various cultures and time periods? Or are we dealing with separate, independent legends that just happen to share a similar motif?
It's like trying to connect the dots of a pigman conspiracy.
A little bit, yeah.
They have all these seemingly unrelated sightings, yet there's this unsettling pattern, this recurring image of the pig-faced monster.
It really makes you wonder if there's a deeper meaning, a symbolic significance that we're just beginning to uncover. And the fact that William Derricks and his family were essentially erased from official records adds another layer of intrigue.
But what do you mean erased?
The PDF mentions that their names were removed from census records and other documents as if their existence was deliberately scrubbed from history. It speaks to the extreme level of social ostracization they face.
That's chilling.
It is.
It makes you think about how many other stories, how many other legends might be out there hidden in the shadows because those who experienced them were silenced or ignored. And it makes me wonder what else might be hidden within the story of the pigman. Yeah, it really is. And it makes you think about all those unspoken histories, right? Those histories woven into these pigman tales, a history of those who were cast out and forgotten or deliberately erased.
Right.
But let's maybe shift gears for a minute and think about the social function of these legends.
Okay.
Remember we talked about the Vermont pigman serving as a cautionary figure?
Oh, yeah, those cautionary tales that are often used to reinforce societal norms, especially in those communities where those norms are, very deeply ingrained.
Yeah.
The pigman, with all its grotesque imagery, it becomes this sort of folkloric boogeyman.
Right.
A way to scare people, particularly teenagers, I think, into behaving themselves.
So the pigman is like a tool for social control, a way to discourage certain behaviors through fear.
Yeah, pretty much.
But do you think these legends still hold the same power today? I mean, what does the pigman represent in a modern context?
Yeah. That's a really good question. The pigman, with that unsettling blend of human and animal features, it could represent a range of our contemporary anxieties.
Like what?
Well, perhaps it reflects our unease with rapid technological advancements, genetic engineering, that blurring of the lines between humanity and artificial intelligence.
You're right. It's like the pigman embodies those fears of the unknown, of the things that we just can't fully control or understand.
Yeah.
It becomes like a symbol of our anxieties about the future, about the potential consequences of our own actions.
Exactly. It's like a cautionary tale for the 21st century,
right,
reminding us that, progress can come with these unintended consequences. And what's remarkable is that these legends, they're not static. They evolve and adapt to reflect those changing anxieties of the culture.
So the pigman is like a mirror reflecting back our deepest fears, reminding us of the potential for darkness even in the midst of progress. And speaking of darkness, one theme that consistently pops up in these pigman stories is this sense of liminality, of being in those in-between spaces. Bridges, tunnels, abandoned buildings, they all seem to be prime locations for pigman encounters.
And those are the places, where our imaginations run wild.
Yeah.
Those liminal spaces where the boundaries of reality feel blurred and we become more susceptible to suggestion,
right,
to those primal fears that lurk beneath the surface.
It's like the pigman exists in those cracks in our perception, those places where logic and reason break down and our minds are free to create their own terrifying narratives.
And that's what makes these stories so unsettling. They challenge our sense of order, our belief that we understand the world around us. They remind us that there are forces beyond our control mysteries that may never be fully explained.
It's that what-if factor that keeps us hooked.
Yeah.
That nagging doubt that maybe there's more to reality than we care to admit.
Absolutely.
So after all this, after delving into the dark heart of pigman lore, what's the takeaway for our listeners? What should they keep in mind as they navigate the world? you know,
Yeah.
perhaps even encountering their own pigman moment.
I think the key is to stay curious, to approach these legends with an open mind, but also, with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Mm-hmm.
Don't dismiss every strange encounter as supernatural, but don't be afraid to embrace the mystery and the wonder that these stories evoke.
It's about finding that balance between belief and disbelief,
Right.
between the rational and the irrational.
Mm-hmm.
After all, isn't that what makes these stories so compelling? The
Yeah.
fact that they straddle that line between what we know and what we fear.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe one day you'll have your own pigman encounter,
Oh, wow.
your own brush with the strange and the unsettling, and perhaps you'll be the one adding a new chapter to this ever-evolving legend.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to step out of these shadowy woods and back into the light of day. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of pigmen.
Until next time, keep exploring those strange and shadowy corners of the world. And remember, sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we create ourselves.